Hello, everyone. It's great to see you. I was here last year at Coalesce. It's about twice the size this year, so, good to see it growing. Okay, so this is me. I'm a senior data engineer at a company called Datavault. I will get on to making that less confusing in a second. If you want to contact me, these will be at the end as well. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on our Slack. And of course, you've got my email address there as well. Cool. So this is my company, a picture of us at Coalesce last year. We are a consulting company that specialize in the Datavault method. So it was a clever marketing thing. We just named ourselves after it. We didn't invent it. Now, we are the creators of a package called AutomateDV. It used to be called Datavault. And that is a free open source package on the DBT ecosystem. All of us who work at Datavault are AutomateDV certified, Datavault certified, and we're UK based, but we've just opened a US branch about 2 weeks ago, so pretty good. Now, show of hands before I go through these, who's heard of Datavault before? Wow, okay, a lot more people than I thought, excellent. And okay, so who's actually implemented a project on Datavault before? Okay, less people, that's all right, good, okay. So you'll be learning something then. Excellent. So I've introduced myself, I've introduced the company. I was going to introduce you to yourself, essentially. So I think you are curious, want to know what Datavault is. You've maybe heard about Datavault, unsure, maybe a bit skeptical. You could even be starting a new project with Datavault, and you kind of want to learn a bit more about it before you start. And this should be all of you facing problems with delivery timescales, development costs, and scaling your data solutions. Does that sound like some of you here in the audience today? Cool, I'm seeing lots of nods, that's great. So now the most important member of our team, my cat. I promise there's a point, bear with. This is him when we first got him home. He was a rescue, and they reckon he was astray for about 2 or 3 years. And when we first got him home, he ran into the corner and hid under the corner of the room under my wife's desk for about 7 hours. Now, the reason I'm talking to you about Sammy is because that when people are first seeing Datavault for the first time, or even DBT, you're going to be a bit anxious about it. You're maybe not sure how it works. It's this big thing. There's a lot of links between what Sammy must be feeling here and what you guys maybe are feeling as well. Is like, what is this thing? Bit more to the story is the reason he was rescued is because he was pushing other cats into a pond, and he was reported to the rescue charity. So not only was he sort of worried about the outside world, he was also a little bit of a, what's the word? Bit of a rogue. Anyway, so by the end of this talk, I'm hoping you'll look a bit more like this, a bit more happy Sammy. And we'll come back to that in a second. So the idea of today is I'm not going to go into lots and lots of detail about the DBT side of things. I will show you how that works. But I want to give you an insight into how Datavault itself works, and if it might be right for you, answer some of the questions you might have, and at least give you a better understanding than when you started, just so you can make more informed decisions. That's the idea of today. So these are some of the questions that I get quite a lot. One thing I forgot to mention. So I have been practicing Datavault for about 5 or 6 years now, and DBT about 4 or 5 years. So in the last 5 years or so, these are some of the most common questions I get. Is it just a data modeling technique? Short answer is no. Our customers need results now. I don't have time to model things. Who's using it? All that kind of stuff. So these are the questions I'm kind of targeting today. And this is the agenda. So I'm going to go over a short history of Datavault, where it came from, how it works, what it is, why you might use it, how to do it with DBT, most importantly, some issues you may face and how to mitigate them, and how to get started with it. So where did it come from? First, I just want to give I'm not going to teach you to suck eggs here. I'm not going to read this out. But for those of you who can maybe come from more of a data lake sort of background and are unsure maybe about what data warehousing itself is, let's pick up on a few of the key points here. It's integrated by business key. It's in support of management's decision-making process and in support of auditability. So those are the three main bits. And this was said by Bill Inmon, who most of you should know. He's basically the guy who started data warehousing. And this was said at the Datavault conference, the WWDVC in 2019. So those three bits are kind of what I'm going to focus on today, and this will be the running theme. The whole point of Datavault is it's for the business, by the business. Obviously, you need some developers in there to get it implemented, but it's generally business-focused. So, bit of a sort of kind of timeline of Datavault and data warehousing. Bill Inmon, Ralph Kimball, these are names you should know. Dan Lindstedt, he's the guy who invented Datavault. And essentially, he said this himself. He built on the shoulders of giants. Bill Inmon, Ralph Kimball, they're massive names. They have built data warehousing from the ground up. Star schemas, Ralph Kimball, top-down data warehouse modeling, 3NF, all these things. These are the people that built that. And Datavault builds on both the best of both worlds from both of those methodologies. So looking at the timeline of Datavault, this is answering the question, why haven't I heard of it? Is it new? No, it's not new. It was built by Dan Lindstedt in sort of in the 90s until 2000. This is the year before Shrek came out, by the way, 2001. It makes me feel very old. Anyway, it was built for the US Department of Defense because there was no existing method for large-scale data. And I don't just mean organization-wide, as in lots of systems. I mean the sheer size, the amount of data. So he built this for petabyte data scales because there was nothing that existed that could handle and perform at those scales. And Datavault today handles petabyte and more data. So he then released a book in 2011. Now notice the time gap here. There's 10 years. That's quite a long time between publicly releasing the method and releasing the book. And this is basically, it was an open method. It took a while to get traction. And the main thing, and this is quite, to me at least, this is what the most interesting bit, is that most businesses with the intent for what Datavault is, so being able to scale up and building systems with large amounts of data and over many, many systems, is that most businesses, even now, even small businesses, have a lot of data systems and have a lot of data. Back then in the 90s, it was a very small percentage of businesses that actually even needed something like Datavault. And now, as I say, even small businesses are looking for something that scales well, either because they're startups that are very quickly growing, or they turn up with a lot of data. Maybe they're a company that buys out other companies, and you just kind of have a lot of data to start with. So anyway, I'm not going to go through this timeline in too much detail, but you can see the kind of evolution of it. And you've got the main, if I ever say the book, it's the 2015 book here. And that's where most people start with Datavault, is they read that book and they go off and they start a project. And we'll get onto why that can cause some problems in a second. And then in 2020, most recently, a guy called Patrick Huber, he works for Snowflake now. He's pretty great. I met him, had the opportunity to meet him last month for the first time. And yeah, all these people are providing more and more knowledge, more and more information about how to actually practically do Datavault. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of where Datavault came from, where it's going, and why you might have really only heard of it in the last few years. So what is it? Well, let's look at the kind of the definition given by Dan. Again, I'm not going to read this out in too much detail, but there's two main points here. It's a system of business intelligence. There we go, going back to it's for the business, and it's intended to be building an enterprise vision. So we're not talking about 2 or 3 data sets. We're talking about potentially dozens, maybe even hundreds of data sets all going into one place. It's built for integration. And that's a very big version of the cover of the book. So Datavault is very good for all of these things. And today we're going to be mainly looking at automation, the auditability, and the integration of multiple systems. But it's good for all of these things. It's agile because you don't have to boil the ocean. In fact, we absolutely recommend not doing that. You can start small and build it out. Even as the business grows, your data warehouse can grow with you. And you can start small. If you already have a bunch of systems you want to prove Datavault, you can start small and build up more systems around it. So what does it aim to solve? Now, the key points here are, like I said, as businesses grow, they have more data to integrate from new branches they've opened up, like physical branches in the world of their business, new systems coming in, maybe even new services. Maybe they've just launched a website, and now they're getting loads of data in from their website as well. And they're potentially buying out other companies. So the business itself is growing, and they need a way for their data solution to be able to grow with them and catch up with them, or hopefully stay ahead. Now, this creates a lot of technical debt. If you don't have a solution built to scale with the business and the quantity of data as well, not just the number of systems, you're going to be building up quite a lot of technical debt here. So you're going to have to go back and refactor as more systems come in. If you build your system around the data and not around the business. It can lead to data silos, poor governance, lack of access to the data, all kinds of problems, all the problems that most of you may have seen in your companies or in clients. Excuse me. So, as I was saying, these are the growing pains. These are the reasons why companies might want Datavault. And the ultimate idea is to not completely solve these, because if you have complex data and you have a lot of data, there's not much way around it. However, it provides a pattern and a standard way to integrate things together and to build something with a lot less pain. And I'll show you how. Before we do that, I'll show you kind of who's using it now. Thinking about it, companies that have lots of systems to integrate together are generally going to be kind of the finance industry, banking, telecoms, Internet of Things, where their systems might actually be individual devices. Healthcare, so for example, the NHS in the UK, they don't have one centralized database. They have tons and tons of kind of branches all around, dotted all over, and they each have their own data, and obviously it's all very secure, private data, so that if they want a international view of it or a national view of it, they're going to have a lot of systems they need to integrate. So it's businesses with lots of systems and businesses with large amounts of data in those systems, distributed. So this is a standard 3-layer architecture for data warehousing. Most of you will recognize this. It looks very similar to in-mon warehouses. The main difference being this middle bit, which rather than kind of the traditional ways, is uses Datavault and uses something, we call it the raw vault in Datavault. So this is kind of your conformed layer. This is where you do all the integration before it goes off to your users, before they can start querying it and getting the insights. So this is the integration. This is where the magic happens, basically. Now, I'm going to explain kind of how data modeling works in Datavault. And before we do that, I'm going to explain or get you to think about the 3 kind of main things that, from the business's perspective, they want to see in their data. So if you think about it, they want to know what things are in their data. So we call those business objects, how to identify, define them. They want to be able to see and record interactions between those business objects and understand how they relate to each other. So that's business object interactions. And they also want to know the state of those objects at any given point in time. And kind of those 3 things are what forms the basis of your data solution, and that's how you provide a data solution from the perspective of the business, is by giving them these 3 things. So we can provide these 3 things using 3 standard patterns. Each of these is a pattern, and in Datavault, we call those hubs, links, and satellites. The E has gone walkabout there. Sorry about that. So in Datavault, hubs are your list of unique business keys. And we'll see kind of actual a model in a second with the actual data and columns and everything, so it will be less abstract shortly. The links are rightfully named because they help you relate those concepts that are contained in the hubs. They list unique relationships between the keys, and your satellites contain the descriptive data over time, and they also hold history. Now, the great thing is that these are all patterns, and because they are patterns, they are automatable, and because you can automate them, because they are patterns, you can generate the SQL for them. And many of you are probably, hopefully, joining the dots of how DBT can come into this. And the idea is it forms a hub and spoke design, and I won't be talking about this too much, but I'm happy to talk about this afterwards in more detail. It's insert only, so you never update or delete anything, and that's where some of the audit capabilities come in. And it's parallel load as well, so it's optimized for loading. Datavault is optimized for loading, so that you can bring in sources in parallel. If sources are updating at different times, different cadences, you can bring them in. Doesn't matter, Datavault doesn't care. So the two key things there are, again, integrating on business key. Remember, this is about the business. And it forms a data model of the core business concepts. So let's come back to what the business care about. Those are your hubs, those are your links, those are your satellites. And that is a kind of a basic diagram of how a model might look in Datavault. So one way, I really like this analogy, and we found it works well for people who are new to Datavault. Imagine a clothesline here. You can't put up a blue shirt, a hub, unless you put up a red shirt, which is a link, because a link relates two or more of these concepts together. They form a chain of entities, which represent the backbone of how the business works. Hence, we call this our spine model. And if we then want to add our satellites onto it with our descriptive data, you're hanging your satellites on your shirts or your hubs or your links. So each satellite represents and holds information about that concept and each satellite represents a single source of data. So if we want to add a new source of data, we just add more satellites for each source to that concept. So suddenly, your data model is scalable because as long as you've still got the same concepts, and even if you don't, you just add more hubs and links to represent those concepts. If you've got new data coming in that represents customers from other systems, you just add a satellite. Your integration backbone is your hubs and links. That's your core integration powerhouse, essentially. So let's look at kind of building this up bit by bit. And now we kind of get our first look at what a hub actually looks like, all the columns and everything. This is hub customer, this represents a hub, and I'll go through what all these columns are in a second. Suddenly we've also got hub order, so this represents our orders, and we've got similar data in there. You notice at the moment they look identical to each other. They've just got very slightly different column names, and the columns have different values. Otherwise they're identical. This is our pattern. We've got our link, and generally our link, we name it based on the relation between the things we're linking. So in this case, we're saying a customer has an order. I guess you could also say makes an order. The customer has an order. And in here, you can see that it's pretty much the same as the hubs. It's just got one additional column at the top, which you may have already figured out is customer and order kind of joined together, concatenated together to form a unique key for this relationship. And then we've got depots. So maybe our business is now it's grown a bit, and we want to add in the fact that we can fulfill orders from a depot. Except at the moment, it doesn't do anything. It's on its own. There's no way to connect anything to it. So we add a link in here to say, okay, the order comes from a depot. And again, we've got a list of the unique relationships between orders and depots. So let's now add our satellites. Now, we'll just say, generally, in a Datavault model, we wouldn't do all of our hubs and links and then add satellites. We can do, and that's a good way of, you do the model of the spine. Sorry, let me go back. If you're modeling purely conceptually without yet implementing it, you do the hubs and links model first, then you start adding the satellites, because the idea is to get a good idea of what the business interactions are between objects, and then you add the satellites in. However, when you're actually implementing this, so if you're implementing this from a written down model, you generate it all at the same time. You generate it all at the same time. So let's add a satellite here. Now, you notice that sat_web, so it's a web satellite for our web source system. So this is from the website, and we've got information about the address for the customer. So this is only one source system. Let's add another source system. We've just added a CRM system, so now we have more data about the customer. We've now got their date of birth, their name, contact number. We've also got information about the orders. And so we just hang off the customer details from the hub, and we've got the address details and the order details. And so this model represents two source systems for the interactions between the orders, customer, and depots. So let's have a look at what these columns mean now. The one at the top here, HK, is hash keys. They're hash representation of the business keys, so the order ID, depot ID, it's a hash of that. And we hash, this is a whole other topic in itself, so I won't have time to go into it today, but we hash for performance reasons and for consistency. So it means that if we've got the same ID in multiple source systems, it will always be the same, it will always be the same length because we've hashed it. And so, for example, a MD5 hash is 16, I believe. So it means that the same length, and it helps performance on most things. Hashing is not required, but in most cases we do it. We've also got the load date time and record source. Now you'll notice this is on every single table, and that's where we get our audit from. The load date time is when we first loaded it. These are the magic that provides some of the Datavault's data audit and traceability. Load date time is when we first loaded it, and the record source is where we got it from. So in this case, record source for the records in the CRM will be CRM. And because our hub has data from two different source systems in it, some records in that hub are going to be CRM record source, and some of them are going to be web record source. And then we've got our payload for the satellite. So the payload is our actual descriptive data of the concepts, and we call this our payload. And that's going to basically be different for every satellite. But the idea is if you think about it, it's just a list. It's just a list of column names. And then we have our hash diff. Now, this is basically a checksum. Rather than having to compare every single column to every single other column, we just concatenate them all together, hash it, and then we only have to compare A to B rather than A to B, A to D, A to C, etc. Just makes the comparisons easier when we're tracking the history. Remember, we track history in a satellite, so that we can keep making sure that if there's a change, we can detect it with the hash diff, and we just keep a running track of changes to this data. So let's have a look at a kind of example mapping. So we have on the left here the customer tables. This is our raw source data coming in from our system, our CRM or our web system, in this case CRM. And we stage that, and that we add essentially all the columns that we need for the Datavault, so the hashes and the auditing columns. And then that means that we can map straight through to our raw vault. So hub and satellite here. And this shows quite an important bit. One single staging table can map to multiple different raw vault tables. It's very rare that you have sort of more than maybe between 6 and 10, but sometimes you will get quite a lot of tables coming out of your source system. And that's just kind of a normal way the mapping works, essentially. So hopefully you now understand the fundamentals of how Datavault works. How do we do this with DBT? Now, you also notice as well that like I mentioned earlier, the parallel loading feature of Datavault fits perfectly with DBT, first of all, because we've got multiple threads in DBT. If we're loading, say, 10 hubs, 10 satellites, a couple of links, we can do all of that in parallel. The relational integrity doesn't matter, and we don't have to load a hub and a link first before we load the satellites. We can load these all in parallel. So it makes it very powerful, and if we generate all of this, we can essentially generate our entire warehouse from DBT. So that's where AutomateDV comes in. I personally think this is a bit of a kind of match made in heaven for Datavault. For Datavault and DBT and that's AutomateDV. just realized I think I failed to mention I'm the product manager of AutomateDV, by the way. It's been kind of my baby for about 5 years. So yeah, that's probably an important bit of information to miss out. Sorry about that. So that's how AutomateDV works. It's essentially a bunch of macros. We've got a macro for hub, macro for link, macro for satellite. These columns, those standard columns, so hubs generally have 4 columns. The links, I forgot to mention, links can relate 2 or more entities or concepts together. It doesn't have to be 2. And generally, it means that the foreign keys from the link to the hubs, you just basically add more foreign keys. And that is a parameterizable macro. So that's how AutomateDV works. Oh, and something I'm quite proud of, we're in the top 20 most installed DBT packages, which I thought was pretty cool. So that's what a hub in DBT looks like. We set the metadata. So this is our hub customer from earlier. We set the metadata at the top. So we've got our PK, which is, in this case, customer HK, the natural key or the business key, which we provide as customer ID, and then the load date time and the record source. And also importantly, the source model, so where we're loading this hub from. And then you just call the macro. So you provide all those bits of metadata to the macro. We generate all the SQL, load it all, and leverage DBT to do all of that. So essentially, we are living on the back of DBT because DBT is fantastic. It does most of the heavy lifting for us. We provide the macros, get the user to provide the metadata, and then we go off and generate everything. But of course, because DBT has tests, documentation, all of that stuff, all of those things are important in any data warehouse solution. They're very important in the Datavault, and this provides that. Okay, and there you go. That's a hub customer that would come from this macro. I'm running out of time a little bit, so I'll go through these slides. I knew I'd have a lot of content and wouldn't be able to get through it all, so the slides will be available afterwards, and consider that a gift from me. There's a lot more content in there. Okay, so challenges. I'll go through these fairly quickly. There's something called the source desist in Datavault, which is a big no-no in the Datavault world. And generally what that means is rather than modeling your Datavault from the business's point of view, you've modeled it just using the data. You haven't actually talked to the business about what their processes are and how things relate from their point of view. And so you end up with this massive explosion of way too many tables, potentially thousands, because every single table you've attached a hub to, and every single, say in third normal form, every single relation between 2 tables is also a link, and suddenly you end up with thousands of tables, and it doesn't quite work. So generally, my advice for that would be spend more time with the business. Definitely do data modeling. And then that follows up with, oh, we don't need to do data modeling. And again, the short answer is, yes, you do. Please do it. It's important. You need to make the data work for the business. Data modeling is the way we reason about and solve business problems. It's the data language, the way we talk about it. I'll leave you guys to read this, but this is a very good LinkedIn post from Patrick Cuba, who I mentioned earlier, basically schooling us on why you definitely should do data modeling. And this is what I mentioned earlier. A lot of people read the book, and that's great. Really, really good that you're very eager to start. But as with learning anything new, just reading something and going and doing it, you're going to potentially come across quite a few pitfalls, quite a few errors that other people have made and you can learn from. As a consultant, obviously, I have a bit of bias. You talk to the experts, but I mean it. It's a good idea to get at least some advice and some help from people as you do this. Both of these issues have the kind of same answer, and that's start with a focused, small subset of a problem that you want to solve and use a tool, DBT, AutomateDV, for example, to go with it and try it out and see if it works for you. And this is another big one. It's kind of the same as this one, actually. It's scope, scope, scope. Start small, grow it out, prove incremental value along the way. And I will get onto these slides. So there's a few more there that I've missed out, but they're very much the same message: is start small, try it out for yourself, see where you get with it, find the value. So, like I say, AutomateDV gives you a great start. It's free. Go grab it. It's a DBT package. You should all know how to install DBT packages. It used to be called Datavault, by the way, if anyone's confused. We've renamed it recently. We've got the Datavault user group forums, which are run by us, Datavault, and those are free and open. You can go join them, ask questions to the experts. The Datavault Alliance, which is the official Datavault people, they also have free forums. We run a free Datavault core concepts, which is 2 hours, and you can sign up for it. We do them sort of once a month, once every 2 months. You can sign up to that. It goes into a bit more detail about how Datavault works, and you can also get certified. Now, apart from the last one, they're all free, so the certification is paid for, but highly recommended if you're starting a project and you go in with a team of people. And I'll very quickly skip through these. Some of this stuff is, when I wrote these slides, wasn't quite released yet, but now they are released. They are honorary mentions, so contracts versions, model access, all that cool stuff that just came out. Very excited for that because it really helps support the Datavault method. Some of you may have thought throughout this, there's some similarities to data mesh. You'd be right. That's a whole nother presentation in itself, however. We do have a YouTube video available on that. Actually, my CEO, Neil Strange, is going to be doing a free user group talk on that as well shortly. I think next week or the week after, actually. So that'll be available on our YouTube channel. And also, column level lineage we're very excited about. And I will leave you guys with this. There's a DBT core discussion where essentially they're talking about model templates as a proposed solution for helping us generate even more things. Because essentially the workflow for AutomateDV and DBT at the moment are you have a model, you have a hub, for example, you copy and paste, you change the metadata, you copy and paste, you change the metadata, and that's solved and automated most of it, but it's still, it's still a slower process than we'd like. So one of the suggestions is model templates, which will mean you can define like all your metadata in YAML and just say, this is the template I want to use, which can be a macro, for example. And DBT, instead of you having to create all the SQL files for it and all the models, we'll just go off and generate all that behind the scenes for you. And so that's kind of been inspired by how Datavault works and a few other large-scale implementations of DBT where people are starting to generate most of their models. And this will mean you can start doing that inside DBT, which is really cool. Really proud to be kind of part of the conversation. I've made a few suggestions there myself. So yeah, in conclusion, scalable, pattern-based solution, lends itself to automation. Start. There you go. Thank you very much.